Good afternoon. This is the Public Works, Finance, and Safety Committee meeting of Monday, July 2nd, 2018. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. And just for the public's knowledge and also for the committee members, we have combined our committees into one big committee, including Finance, Public Works, and Safety. So everyone can vote and make motions. So I would like a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Lallam, second by Councilman Y. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. The second item on the agenda is public input. This is a time for people to talk about things that may not be on the agenda. Is there anyone who would like to do so? Seeing none, I will move on. Item number 3 is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion and second?
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Vilhauer.
Second.
Second by Councilman Thorson. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 4 is consideration of change order number 1, final, with Smith & Smith Construction, Inc. for the Highway 81 Storm Sewer Structure Improvements Project number 1809 for a decrease of $200. So I'll look for a motion and second for recommendation of approval of this.
Second.
Moved by Councilman, who moved that? Councilman Danforth, and second by Councilman Lallam. Colin, you want to tell us about this?
Yes. So this was, for Project 1809. These were for the stormwater, the structures on Highway 81 that were recently completed. There was 5 total. And this is just the final change order, identifying bid items for final quantities. It just happened to be that there was one item that they didn't use for $200.
Okay. Any questions or concerns? See none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 5 is consideration of change order number 1 with Dunnick, Inc. for the Sanitary Sewer Improvements Project number 1808 for an increase of $12,645. And I'll look for a motion to recommend approval of this.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Albertson.
Second.
Second by Councilman Solom. And this is a pretty hefty increase. So, Colin, you want to explain it?
Yes. So during construction, we came across a problem. They took off the asphalt, and it was all black dirt underneath. There was no gravel. You could have used the black dirt in gardens. It was pretty good, black dirt. But we did not want to put the road back on top of that black dirt, as the road would probably fail in just a couple of years, maybe. So I guess we made a field order instructing them to do geotextile fabric underneath 12 inches of base course or crushed concrete in this case. It is a significant amount, but we felt like it was necessary for the project to not be doing this again in a couple years.
Okay, Colin, which street was this?
This was 4th Street Northwest, so it was right off of 10th Avenue, directly to the north of the hospital.
And is it curb to curb?
It is curb to curb for one block.
One block. Any questions or concerns?
Mayor, when we have an increase like this, and then because we'll see the next one also has an increase, maybe it's more of a question for Kristen, but where are we ensured that those dollars are coming from? Do we need to identify those, or is that coming?
Yes. So this would increase the contract number, but we would still be under budget. by a considerable amount. We have a budget of $285,000 for this. This was a unique project where we split the street portion into a street project and then the sanitary portion into the sanitary portion. And for the street budget, we had $285,000, and currently we were estimated at $205,000, roughly just over. And so with the increase of $12,645, we would still be under budget by a considerable amount.
Well, that's a good question. Even if we didn't have enough money in this project, it comes out of the second penny, the 212 budget for projects, and with the street project. We could, this being a sewer project, if we had to, and this was, there's some leeway in being able to bill that back to a sewer project, because the reason we dug up the street was it was a sewer project. So, and that's a different fund.
Is it safe to assume then, from the council standpoint on situations like this, that if it is a budget issue, that it'll be brought to our attention as that we need to consider where funds will come from? Otherwise, we know that it's covered. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's a good question. Councilman Y?
Colin, something like this, is that pretty unique that you found the black dirt under there? I mean, is it pretty odd? Are we going to, obviously we could run into it more, but is this the first time you've seen something like this?
It's definitely my first time. I haven't been in Watertown for very long.
Unfortunately, it's not unique.
And last year we ran into this over by the Conradi addition where it wasn't sufficient base, so we decided to do the same thing last year. This one, seeing no base under it, I think is kind of unique, at least a little. At least usually you'll see an inch or two at the minimum, but I don't know if it just over time, because these roads are pretty old up in that area, that
Right.
if it just kind of gradually.
It mixes. When you have bad material under gravel, over time the material mixes, and that's why we're putting fabric here, because that prevents the material from seeping up into the crushed concrete that we're putting down. We didn't do that back when this road was first built. That wasn't a technique that was used. Yep. These geotextile fabrics are something new in the last few decades.
So maybe it was built properly, but
it might have been. It's probably an older street. It's up by the hospital. It's not a new part of town.
Yeah.
Not the oldest part of town, but it's very possible that we have a lot of streets where this is going on, especially in areas where we have, this kind of soil. It does tend to mix.
Yeah, and we run into that more in areas that are kind of swampy lands, because those soils just naturally kind of soak everything and rise up. So
that's right. Any other comments or concerns, questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 6 is consideration of change order number 2 with Rounds Construction for the landfill stormwater improvements project number 1818 for an increase of $9,794.25. And I'll look for a motion to recommend approval.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Lallam. Second by Councilman Y. And Colin, you want to tell us about this one?
I'm gonna refer to Mike just because he
Sorry,
came up.
Thank you. On the afternoon of June 19th, last Tuesday, Rounds Construction, while working on the installation of some stormwater pipe on our project, they uncovered waste material in an area where it was not expected to be. This waste was about 3 foot below the surface, and it was about 20 to 30 feet south of a manhole, which they just installed. As they continued to dig in a southerly direction, the depth of the waste increased, so we went from a Ray, if you can pull up my photo, I'll give you a picture. Maybe it won't show up very well here. Let me put it, okay. Oh. There we go. Sorry about that.
You're gonna
All the
make
way
us-
around 360.
Yeah.
So they're laying this pipe here running from the north to the south, and they're putting it in some nice glacial till clay, and all of a sudden a dark stain showed up, and it just looked like a dark stain, and it gradually got thicker to where they had about 1.5 feet of waste, and then as we went a little further, this sloped down, and what we had encountered was the northeasterly corner of an old pre-subtitle D garbage pit. It was farther east than what it was expected to be. So at that point, then we knew we had a conflict. So we halted the operation, and then Houston Engineering notified the State Department of Environment and Natural Resources of the waste, because we have to notify them of this. And in a project like this, there's a standard distance they'd like to keep your pipe away from waste, so there's no cross-contamination with stormwater and or garbage. So Houston proposed, and the DENR approved a verbal plan to dig some test pits downstream. Further down south of this pipe, there are 2 more manholes. And so what we went down is we did test pits at those 2 locations to see if we still encountered waste. And then those pits got dug further east till we defined the waste limits. And then Scott Engineering surveyed in that information, so we got our pipe out of the waste. If you put a storm sewer pipe in waste, it would likely subside and you would lose your hydraulic profile. It wouldn't stand up over time. And it could either put water into garbage, or if the garbage pit had water in it at some point due to a big storm, because pre-subtitle D, there weren't leachate collection systems and liners. They were basically a hole in the ground. So we want to do is, what we're doing with this change order is we're now proposing to shift the whole line east to get outside those waste limits, so we have a good solid pipe in the ground and still drain and service the same area that the project was intended to service. With that, shifting that line east, and what we're proposing here is to install 1 new 60-inch storm sewer manhole. And this is at a revised unit price of $4,750. Sorry, it's $647.97 above the price that we paid for the other manholes, but it's being shipped by itself, and the construction of it's being expedited. So we felt that's a good price, and we got that price from Rounds Construction. Additionally, as the pipe shifted east, it went from a grassy stormwater ditch into a graveled area. So the contractor will be recovering about 45 cubic yards of the existing gravel at a contract unit price of $4.25 per cubic yard for $191.25. And then as this pipe is shifted over, there's more grading and excavation is required to drain the area to the inlet structures. So the increased excavation is in the amount of $2,538 based upon the contract unit price of $4.23 a cubic yard. And then also on the north end of this pipe, it gets close to our scale house building, and we know there's a potable water, drinking water line there that will likely need to be moved. It should be encountered during this relocation, and that comes at a cost of $875. So then the last item would be the test pits, and then the waste that they uncovered when they first hit the waste had to be disposed of in the subtitle D cell legally to get it into the garbage pits and out of the environment. So that waste placement was $1,440. So the total for this proposed change order is $9,794.25. It increases the contract value to $416,271.43. It does not. They've not asked for any contract time extension. So just to let you know where this would put us if you approve this change order, if we the new contract price with this change order and the previous change order is currently $63,280.57 below budget. And then we budgeted $60,000 for construction engineering on this project. We entered into a contract with Houston Engineering for $54,900. And let's suppose these change orders at the end of the project, we have 2 or even a final quantity adjustment. And if I just arbitrarily assigned a rough cost to that, that could be up to $4,000 cost there. And that would take us up to $58,900, so we'd still be $1,100 below budget there. When we put all the change orders together and my estimate on potentially higher engineering costs, the project should be completed on time, $64,380.57 below budget. So we have the money, we have to relocate the pipe, and we encountered it. There's just no way around it. So with that, I would say that all of the pipe has been laid except for this last piece that we're proposing to relocate. All the excavation has been completed, so we're at a point where we're installing fence, erosion control, and then we're going to do some gravel placement and then the seeding, and the project should be done well ahead of schedule and under budget. So,
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed signify by saying nay.
Mayor, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Mike, did you say the trash was blue? Is there?
well, it looks kind of bluish gray.
Is there a
in the
reason?
picture. It looks like black. It looks like black mud in a slough. We first
Organic material.
Yeah, it's just
biodegrading.
decomposed
Is that what it
organic.
is?
So it starts out, it's kind of a black, but it does look like it has a blue tint to it. But yeah, it went deeper. So we were going to get into a pit that would be several feet deep. And there are no as-built drawings at this, so that's why we did the test pits, because this was that plan of those test pits was back in early 70s, internal design, and actually dug by landfill staff with landfill equipment, from what I hear. So,
Yeah, thank you. That motion carried. Okay, item number 7 is consideration of a contract with MAC Land Surveying LLC for construction support on the shooting range construction project number 1619. And I'll look for a motion to recommend approval. Moved by Councilman Danforth. Second by Councilman Albertson. Sorry. Colin, could you explain this?
Yeah, so the gun range or the shooting range is expected to start this week, and with our staff being very short-handed at the time being, with two people recently gone, and our staff not familiar with the staking requirements for this project. We didn't do the initial survey for this project. That was hired by MAC Land Surveying, or hired by the state to do for whatever. And so we're asking that City Council approve this so we can hire MAC Land Surveying to do the survey and staking for this. And we wrote in there for the total contract not to exceed $5,000. Trying to limit the total contract because we are paying by hour. So we don't want it to go and way over budget or anything, but we do have budget set aside for this project.
We got good bids on it too, so as you recall.
Is it, so Colin, you're saying that originally we had planned on doing the staking ourselves within the city?
That is correct, yes.
All right.
We're shorthanded, so Councilman Albertson.
At one time, Colin, I don't know if you're involved in this, but at one time it was brought up to look into adding longer range lanes at that point when we were doing this, because the guys were here and they were really competitive in their bid. Has that been done? Do you know? Has there been any follow-up on that?
I guess short answer is no. I did bring this up with the state, talking with them, the GFMP, and they were not interested in it. They said that would kind of fall in the city's hands. So I guess there hasn't been too much done on the city's part, just because of, one, being shorthanded, but two, to increase the contract, we can only increase it up to 15% legally. And we would not be able to do that project within the 15%. So we would have to rebid the project.
Or do a separate project.
And
it wasn't just going to be a linear relationship between the amount of work that we had in the contract and the extra work, because the part that the longer those lanes are, the more complex the drainage becomes. And we were having drainage problems as it is with the shorter lanes. So adding an extra long lane, we know we were going to run into drainage problems. That's a given. That would have been a challenge, would have made it exponentially harder to design. They really struggled to design what we have. So, yes.
But as I recall, or refresh my memory, it is being designed or constructed in such a way that if we do want to add the longer
space is
lanes
there.
at some point, that can be done.
The space is there, yes.
Okay.
We'll have to figure out the drainage and,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah, the space is definitely there, and it'd be easy to add. I say easy. It'd be easy to add to that space. The difficult part would be the design of the stormwater, specifically what Sarah was saying.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Item number 8 is approval to submit a letter of intent to the South Dakota Department of Transportation to apply for a transportation alternatives grant for Kempeska Trail Loop development, authorizing a local match from the 18.05% minimum to a percentage agreed upon by the City Council, the consultant, and the city staff. And I'll look for a motion and second for a recommendation, and then we'll have a presentation. Moved by Councilman Vilhauer. Second by Councilman Lallam. And now we will have our presentation from Infrastructure Design Group.
I'm Vanessa Victor with Infrastructure Design Group. We had an unveiling for the master plan for the Lake Trail and closing the loop at the beginning of June. And some of you were able to make it and some of you weren't. So Glenn had asked if I could come and give a short presentation of where the planned route around the lake is going to go and some of the obstacles that are ahead of you now as we head into budgeting season. So basically, the trail ends in two distinct spots around the lake, and it's because of two different reasons, but there was definitely roadblocks that were in place. So we were brought on board to identify the work and go through a series of different trail alternatives for closing the loop. We also wanted to identify some amenities. It's one thing to be on an asphalt trail in the middle of nowhere, but it's also nice to have some water available or trash receptacles. And then at the end, we tried to identify phasing and associated costs for you as the decision makers. When we started out, this is kind of what we had laid out. There were 5 different trail options or combination. I will just point out now, actually, that the finalized route incorporates all 5 of those options and some that weren't even thought of at the onset of the project. So it all started with the kickoff meeting in October. We gathered a lot of comments from people that could make it and people that couldn't. There were comment cards that were circulating. We took polls of various amenities that people would want to see. None of the amenities are out of line. I mean, people aren't looking for hot air balloon rides or anything crazy, just pretty minimalistic amenities. There were a couple bike repair stations, which does make sense because when you are out on the trail, you're pretty isolated if something were to happen to your bike. We also polled the audience to see if we could get members for a project advisory committee. So we had a public hearing and then a public unveiling, but through the process, we wanted to make sure that we were vetting our design options to a group of stakeholders, per se. So we identified 5 people that lived along the lake as kind of neighborhood residents that were there to support their community and support their neighbors and what they'd like to see as the trail progressed. They were evenly dispersed throughout the trail. That's the blue dots, or purple dots they're supposed to be. We also had members of the Runners Club, the Bicycle Club, who recently have disbanded, but they donated the remainder of their funds to the amenities on the trail. So that was nice of them. A couple of members of council were also a part of it. South Dakota Game Fish and Parks, because we're going through part of their property, the County Highway Department, Engineering, and Park and Rec. All total, there were about 20 people at each project advisory meeting. And this is what we came up with. Granted, it's hard to see the individual phases as you go through, but we identified it into 4 phases that were distinct with their characteristics and available funding and what type of obstacles that we would encounter. The alignment is based on those landowner and stakeholder comments. We also took considerable stock into safety considerations. We have some steep hills, especially on the east side of the trail, and want to make sure that there's sight distance requirements so people on bicycles can be seen and can see oncoming traffic. We also wanted to take into consideration the number of crossings that are on the trail. On the existing trail around the lake, there's about 3 crossings per mile. On the proposed, we have just over 2 crossings per mile. So each crossing, of course, is a point of conflict and point of inflict, which is a safety hazard. So trying to minimize any potential safety risks. Also took into account geometrics of the trail itself. So we're not building it 10 feet high and having to pay for all that dirt to come in. What was the most cost-effective way of putting a trail into and around the lake? We already talked about that. And I just want to point out quick that the numbers of the phasings are just numbers to differentiate them from one phase to another. They don't prioritize phase 1 more than phase 4. It's just happenstance that we are actually already starting on the design of phase 1. But we'll go into each of the phases and what they entail now. So phase 1, we have started the survey and are getting down to the design. Up to this point, everything was done with LiDAR imagery. When the city had their photogrammetry done basically at the same time, it does sonar and then it picks up the contours. It's pretty good for planning purposes and how we can estimate how much dirt we'll have to move, but in the long scheme and knowing exactly where your utilities are, we got to send out survey crews. So surveyors should be finishing up this week, and we'll have all of the topographic information for this phase of the trail. It is estimated to cost $500,000, and wanted construction is in 2019. Phase 2 starts just west of the water tower on 4th Avenue there and continues 5,300 feet. There's extensive wetlands. It's continuing along South Lake Drive on the south side, so there is quite a bit of wetlands. We are also using the Game Fish and Parks land through Sandy Shores. They were nice enough to be on board with this project and want us to utilize their existing facilities as much as possible, which is a huge cost savings for the city. And so even though we're going over a mile or just about a mile, the estimated costs are only $350,000 for this segment of the trail. And the most prominent obstacle is the wetland permitting, which takes time. Phase 3 is the largest segment of the trail, but it's also the most apt for funding. There's basically two funds that are available for grants for the city to pursue. One is the Transportation Alternatives Grant through South Dakota DOT, and the other is the Rec Trails through Game Fish and Park. Transportation Alternatives generally is a little bit more forthgiving with the amount of money that they want to give out, and since Phase 3 is actually $1.1 million, it makes more sense to try to go for the bigger pool of money. You can't mix within this phase. It wouldn't be ideal to mix both Game Fish and Parks and Transportation Alternatives, because then you have two different agencies looking at the same segment. With anything free, and free money is grant money, it requires additional time. So for planning purposes, we like to say 4 years. You could probably get it in 3 years. There's also a grant cap, which the state will only give you $400,000 at a time. So in order for this to be prominent, it would either the city would have to really contribute everything. They'd get $400,000 and do it all at once, but then you're contributing $700,000, or you can split it up into two subphases, a 3A and a 3B, and then you get more money. Just like with any of your road projects or your bridge projects that I've been in here in the past talking to you about, it is a ranked and scored system where you get different points assigned to you based on your city size, for starters. The higher amount you want to pay, the higher your score is for the funding. Since you went through this planning process, and it is a vetted plan, and so it's not as likely that they're going to award the money and somebody's going to come in and poke holes in it. You also get additional points. As part of this on Phase 3, we are going to be extending that WPA culvert, which counts as a bridge rehabilitation project, so you get additional points as well. And to be competitive, the city would want to look at contributing about 30% as a nice conservative number for budgeting, that you would be a likely candidate. And Phase 4 is the remainder of the trail, and it's by Parkview. Basically, we're looking at, well, actually, engineering was nice enough to say that they would take over this segment of the trail. It's a mill and overlay, and fix the roadway, and then we'll extend the bike path. Will be painted on one shoulder of the road through that until it gets to Phase 3. And this has been placed in the budget for 2019, pending your approval. And estimated costs are about $150,000. So here's kind of just a quick overview of all the phases to date. In its entirety, the trail and closing the trail will cost about $2.1 million. With grant help, you're eligible for about $700,000. That does extend out the time frame for it. And kind of based off of everything that I presented today, here's a kind of a construction schedule that you can look at. With 2019, we'll have trail done on both ends of, pending your approval on the engineering budget, but on Phase 1 and Phase 4. And then 2021, we'll work on Phase 2 by Game Fish and Parks and Sandy Shores and the wetland permitting, and then waiting on the grant money to come in and working through the transportation alternatives process. That gets us to 2022 and 2023 to finish. So we're about 5 years out to finish the entire trail, depending on if you wanted to contribute more than what you are contributing right now. And that is based off of what Parks has right now in their budget is $600,000 with the annual allotment of $175,000. So kind of piecing that out, and how you want to spend that money. And I also need to say that that's for your entire trail system, the $175,000. That covers all your trails through town and at the lake at the same time. So these are not, this is just assuming that your entire budget is going out to the lake.
But if we had 600,000 a year, is that what we're putting toward trails? Because several of these years are in the 300s.
Well, what the council has been putting towards the trail is $175,000 per year.
Okay. Yeah. But we have a balance.
We have a balance,
That's
yes.
what you meant by that. Okay. Got it.
Vanessa, I have a question. Right here. You and I talked a few weeks ago. One of the things, and I have all along expressed concern about the ongoing maintenance and the replacement of many areas of our bike trail that we have. Do we have a standard, like we build roads, right? Do we have a standard that is used for our bike trails that we require them to meet? Or, because you had expressed, because we'd talked, and you'd said it might be that what we're doing is, at times anyway, we're putting trails in and looking at the cost and really not maybe the quality. Is that fair?
It is fair.
Okay, so, which in my mind does us no good. It really doesn't. What we're doing is we're appeasing people for a little while. I'd rather put a trail in that meets our needs in the long term for costs as well. Should we, or do I want to go back to my original question? Do we have a standard that we use in defining the construction of our bike trails? Or do we just let them, whoever gets the bid, go do it?
Does the city have a standard? No. But as our company, yes, we do. And it is a vetted out process, and it's really no different than your roadway. We had just heard about the black dirt and asphalt right on top of it. Things slip from time to time. Even out on the trail in phase 1, we are having geotechnical borings done to make sure that we know exactly what the soil conditions are, and that way we can specify a proper base and proper asphalt on a nice section that should withstand the test of time. I mean, your asphalt cracks, concrete cracks, some things are unavoidable, but massive failures should be avoided.
And we have seen that. We have seen some of these areas where they just, between tree roots and the trail just cracking up and falling apart.
We do have a standard, and
yeah.
it's not like a road. It's a lesser standard, a lower standard than a road would be. And that's why you're seeing that. And maybe we need to increase our standard.
Well, that was where I was going with this, Mayor, is maybe if we've got areas that we know are maybe more susceptible, we may need to increase our standard in those areas, because it doesn't do us any good to put trail in and then it broke up in
I don't think
X
there's
number of years.
I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, Jay. I don't think that we've ever just thrown money at a project and let the constructor design it. We've done our designs in-house, or we've had a consultant do them, and we've used a standard that was, maybe it's not as high as it should be, but it isn't like we haven't thought about the section and what should the base be and what should our level of service be.
Yeah, my assumption was we had a standard. Somewhere along the line we had a standard. But to go back to your point is maybe there are some areas, or maybe we need to increase our standard, because when we get to the open section, I want to talk a little bit about our roads as well, and what standards we use and what we do. So sometimes we need to pay a little bit more, and if it benefits us to do that, so that we get the longevity out of it. That's where I'm going with it. So
Well, and the geotechnical, their investigation and the surface recommendation that we'll get on phase 1 would actually be a nice standing point for any design standard. The soils out at the lake have sand in them, so they actually have a pretty good base. So that would be a nice minimum for anything that you'd see through town.
And I would say that the standard that the city follows is pretty typical of the industry, that it's pretty generalized throughout this part of the nation at least.
Right. Okay, Councilman Lawler.
Vanessa, on phase 1 there where it cuts across, it goes by the water tower by Arnold's storage units there. Is that going to be in the ditch? Is that where they're going to be located at, along there on the west side of the road on South Lake Drive?
On the west side of the road, yes.
Okay,
On
are you going to be
South Lake
filling that ditch in then?
Yes.
Or all the way?
Drive.
Part of the way?
Part of the way.
Okay. And then on the west side, is that going to be in the ditch as well? It'd be on South Lake Drive as well, but west of Sandy Shores. That's phase
Yes.
3, I want to say.
Yes, phase
Is that going to
3
be in
will
the
be on
west side
as
of
well.
is that a ditch there as well?
That is a ditch as well, so we will be filling and have a appropriate buffer away from South Lake Drive, so there is some safety for the trail users.
Okay.
That's
Is
a
that going to
requirement of funding.
be
as
gradual
well.
slope then, or is it
Yeah,
going to be?
none of the slopes on the trail exceed 5%. That's a design standard as well, so.
So if they do go off, they don't just wipe out. Okay. Okay.
Councilman Albertson.
Vanessa, are you relatively sure that we would be able to get that extra money? You know, you're saying that it's out there, it's available, and who applies for it? I mean, not who, yeah, who applies for it? Who actually does the application process?
Well, the city does. I believe it's Jay's intention for us, since we have all the data available, that we would just assemble the package for you. Sorry. The transportation alternatives is this, it's gone through a lot of turnover in the last couple of years. In fact, in the last 4 years, there's been 3 different heads. So I talked to the new head today and on Friday. It's a competitive, and there's a group of people that will weigh our application against every other Class 1 city at the same time. So you do have the repetitiveness in that. That being said, I am fairly confident that you'll get the grant. The thing that could happen is you get the grant and there's just a few more hoops to jump through. And so.
But theoretically, we do have our third of the money in. Right now, we should have that at $175,000 for the last 4 years. That's $700,000. So from here on, if we have that $700,000 banked, we should be able to do what Mike is worried about, concerned about, is the fact that some of these may not be built as well as possible. So we could start spending money after that $700,000 to work on what's already been done.
Yes, but your $700,000 is really going to be $200,000 because phase 1 will eat up that $500,000.
Okay, but
going forward, yes, you
that's still part of the
keep
money.
on recouping.
Councilman Billhauer.
Few questions. Vanessa, what will be your or your company's involvement going forward throughout this project now? I mean, are you done now that we've got a plan laid out, or what's going to be your involvement going forward?
Well, our involvement is still very much in the project. We're continuing to phase 1 design, so we're working on the design of that right now.
But I mean,
the city.
once it gets to the bid letting stage and the actual construction phase, I mean, will you still be monitoring or be involved as far as what's going on?
Yes,
Okay.
and we have that in our contract that we were going to do the construction admin and
Okay.
watching to make sure.
Okay. Also, Jay or Vanessa, are there other grant dollars out there? I know, at some of the meetings that kicked around, there might be some, other possibilities. I mean, anything more that you can shed any light on at this point, or is that too preliminary?
Other than those two, for when it comes to trails, those are by far the two prevalent ones.
And then a follow-up to that is, I know the comment was made by, it may have been Shane that said that at one of the meetings, that with the hoops that we have to jump through, and the resultant delay of getting the whole process, the grant approval, et cetera, could actually end up increasing the cost of this to the point that, I don't want to say the grant dollars aren't worth going after, but that was kind of the sentiment expressed that could be a problem with all the extra hoops and delays that it's causing. Any comments to that?
Everything on phase 3 right now, we do have within the right of way and within the city right of way. Pretty good application of that was in Garrettson. They made them move it beyond the right of way and acquire land. So that did cost the city additional dollars. And it should be noted that if that happens on phase 3, we're the landowners do not want to give any land away, and we're staying within the right of way for a reason. So that will be a significant hoop, but we have enough buffer zone that I don't believe it will be an issue. And because we have vetted it up to this point, we have some documentation that we can show that, we've done our due diligence, and we believe from our standpoint that this is the best route.
Okay. The feedback that I've been getting is a couple comments, particularly on the west side, not thrilled with where the trail is going, but more so the comment I'm getting is, and that was expressed, and I think you took the brunt of it, which was not fair to you that night at the event center, is the longevity yet of how long it's going to take to finish this. I mean, is there anything? I mean, if we were to pour totally city dollars into this, this project could be done in 2019. That would be a fair statement, right? If we had the dollars to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting, but is there something what are we being asked to do now tonight? Because I see we need to make a commitment, and I guess I'm wondering what exactly are we doing now with the step we're taking tonight?
Tonight is doing the due diligence to apply for that transportation alternatives. That is actually due July 16th. So
there's a grant deadline. So.
Yep, right around the corner. So we would assemble that package, put it into the state. If the city did decide that, hey, we're going to put more money towards this and we just want to get it done, the state's not going to be like, no, you have to use our money and you have to wait. So it's kind of a contingency. Okay,
I guess that's where I was going, and maybe you've answered my question now, because we've got budget and CIP hearings coming up within the next month or two now, that if we take a look at the dollars and we decide we want to dump more into it, what we're committing ourselves to tonight won't preclude us from additional funding if the dollars, or if we see fit to dump more dollars into it sooner rather than later.
Correct.
Okay.
Actually, what we're looking at is that this July 16th deadline, that's for a letter of intent, just so they know that we intend to apply for a grant. I think the grant application deadline is the 1st of October, so we got some time in there. And my understanding is after the letter of intent, then the state will come out and review our trail route and probably give us some feedback on that. And, then through the budget process, we should have time to discuss it further.
Okay. Thank you.
Question, Mayor.
Councilman Danforth?
For either one of you, but probably the first part of this, Vanessa, when we talk about having to jump through more hoops, what is that? What are you referring to? What types of things are you referring to? And obviously, there's a cost to hoops. So if we didn't do that, how much are those hoops costing us typically? And let's say in the sum of all of this.
You know, I would know more once they do their site visit, but it is, if they want us to, or if they want the city to acquire land to build this trail beyond the right-of-way, that's a significant cost to the city. So I would say that that would be our worst-case scenario. 10 feet times.
Otherwise, it's I's and
costly.
T's being dotted here and there, and maybe
Yeah,
a little
it's
bit of
just a
paperwork or a
logistical-
little bit of whatever. But
Mhm.
it would seem like our plan. So it may be that the hoops, other than the land acquisition, really wouldn't be a cost factor so much for us. Is that fair?
Correct.
Probably.
That's why we, you know, we had talked about encroachments, and mailboxes and,
Yep.
land acquisition, and all of that has to go through a certain appraisal process. It's funny that you are
Yep.
both sitting right
And-
next to each other. But they, when you're using state money, but that is why we identified phase 3, because there's really none of those that are there. So providing that they're okay with it being in the right-of-way, which they generally should be, they're,
Then we should see minimal costs. Might take us time to get through the process of the grants or whatever, but in a little bit more paperwork. But
Yeah.
okay.
Mike.
The other comment I'll just make, if I can, I've had a few people talk to me about this, and one of the comments, and I think it's very legitimate, is they certainly want this done, but really until now, they've never had a plan in front of them that outlined when it would get done. I think it would be very wrong for us in light of the fact that the hoops, in fact, don't cost us a lot of money, most likely. I think we revisit that if they do. I think we would be remiss not going through this process as planned and taking advantage of the grants, the $700,000 possibility, but knowing that we have a commitment to finishing this within that 5-year period. I think it would be irresponsible on our part just to forego it for the sake of time and forego the $700,000. That's my opinion on it.
Councilman Bill
question.
Howard.
I don't disagree with that, Mike. I think maybe hoops isn't quite the right word even. I think the bigger risk you got there is what construction costs might do over the course of the next 5 years. That, you know, we don't know what, we're getting some pretty favorable bids now currently, you know, what that's going to be like 4 or 5 years. And I think that's the bigger risk in spreading this out. I'm in favor, too, of proceeding with the grant applications, but I think that's the bigger risk that we've got there is what construction costs might do.
Councilman Bueller.
I have a question. Vanessa, when you rolled this out at the event center, there were several folks that came to at the end of that discussion that had some requests, some ideas. Have we changed anything at all on our plan since
no.
those discussions? So it's the same as it was?
It is exactly the same.
Okay.
The majority of the comments were, you know, some people actually wanted it in front of their driveway on phase 3, which I get for accessibility. It's more ideal. That being said, every single driveway is a point of conflict. And, you know, that's a couple people versus I mean, it really got to go back to, we had a project advisory committee, and we had a group of people that were vetting and, I mean, supposed to be chatting with their neighbors to help us lay out the plan. So we are sticking with it. Now, if the trail moves from plan to design 5 feet here or there to avoid, you know, a utility box or a light pole, or, yeah, that could happen. But
Any other comments or questions? Basically, what we're doing tonight is getting authorization to apply for the grant so we can get this going. We aren't obligated to take the grant if we get it. So, and this isn't even the grant, it's just our notice that we intend to apply for the grant.
mm-hmm.
So I'll look for, I've got a motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Okay, item 9 is discussion of preparations for upcoming home rule charter review in 2019. And this is just a discussion, but we do the charter review once every 5 years, and we've only done it once since the charter was adopted. We did it in 2014, I think, and so 5 years will be next year. And basing upon some of the experience that we had with the first charter review, we're looking at possibly making some changes to our ordinance, which the council can do, that would facilitate adoption of any changes to the charter. Changes to the charter have to be made by the general public in an election. So we want to make recommendations in a timely way to happen at the next election. And the way it is now, we're going to miss the boat next year. For election time, they won't make their recommendations until it's too late to get on the election. So election would come 2 years later, possibly. We could have a special election. And then it's, anyway, we can look at those kinds of items that we have in our council, ordinances that the council has authority to change to facilitate that. So the timing of elections, the size of the committee, something that we'd like to talk about, because the committee is 21 people, and that's a lot of people to coordinate schedules, to get meetings together. And then they're just saddled with reviewing the charter, and we know some of the things that they may be looking at. Why not do some homework for them in advance and gather facts so that when they go to do their review, the facts have already been compiled for them. And if they need more information, they can look at that, but we could at least get them started. So just wanted to put it out there that we're starting to talk about this, and we may see some proposed changes to our ordinances. Anybody want to add anything? Glenn?
I think it's a good idea. In talking with some of the members that were on the Home Rule Charter Review Committee 4 years ago, the comments that we heard was trying to coordinate 21 people's schedules, like you said, and then not having a whole lot of time based upon the way that our ordinance lays out when that committee gets selected versus when they have to bring their recommendations forth. There wasn't a whole lot of time for that group to do their work. And not to say that they didn't do a thorough job 4 years ago, but I think in asking them, would you have appreciated if somebody could have looked at some ideas ahead of time and given some thoughts or recommendations to the Home Rule Charter Committee? Would that have been appreciated? And the comment was absolutely. So I think what you're saying, Mayor, makes an awful lot of sense. So I think we're looking at, maybe tweaking our ordinance a little bit relative to the timing of the whole process, especially relative to the election part of it, and then secondly, giving some assistance to that Home Rule Charter Committee, because that's not consisting of any of our council members. That's 21 members of the public that aren't closest to the action like we are. So I think if we can do some homework ahead of time and give some recommendations or thought to that committee, they'll have a leg up then as they do their work early part of next year.
All right. Any other comments about that? Moving on, item number 10 is old business. Is there any old business? Glenn?
Mayor, I know what's in your hands. I'm not trying to push the issue, but I know there are members of the public. We talked about the speed limit issue around the lake the last several meetings. In fact, can you give us some idea when you and your group of staff will be looking as far as making a recommendation on that?
I haven't tried to picture when I want to talk to the police department, and the police chief has been on vacation. He's back now, and I do need to get together with him because I intend to ask him to do some study and gather some information. And a speed study takes time, and I don't know how much time it takes them. The police department will do those, and so I'll give you an update after I've had a chance to talk to him. Any other old business?
well, I don't know if it's old or new. A couple things. As I'd mentioned earlier, I want to talk a bit about our roads, quality of our construction of our roads, and our standards that are used just a little bit, but do we have unique soil situations within the Watertown area that differs from other parts, other communities that may create more road issues for us here? Quality of roads, breakup, whatever it is. I don't know if we do or not, but it seems like we have some areas that those roads aren't very old and they're broken up and we have problems. And, you know, again, I go back to it in whether our standards aren't right or they need to be changed periodically depending on soil conditions or whether we're not monitoring them and they're not being put in correctly, I don't know. But so that's an intriguing question to me. I don't expect an answer today, but I'd like to understand where we're at. We put a lot of money into roads. We put a lot of money into the maintenance roads. And as we all know, we got a lot of complaints about roads.
Right.
So I'd like to understand that better than I do today.
I'm glad you're asking. Actually, pretty much everyone who does engineering outside of Watertown and comes to Watertown and sees what we've used for a standard is surprised at how flimsy our standard has been in the past. And I want to take a look at that. We used to have a standard written right into our ordinance, and we took that out in 2010, and then we've struggled to adopt something different. So between 2010 and now, every developer that builds a road negotiates what they build. And so it's one of my priorities to adopt development standards. And that process, I am going to ask everyone to thoroughly immerse themselves in the pros and cons. It's more expensive to build a higher standard road, but it lasts longer. We, the city, are not in the business of constructing roads. We maintain roads. Developers of land construct roads, and of course they want to be as inexpensive as possible so that they can save money. And so there's a delicate balance there between the cost of construction versus the long-term cost of maintaining a road forever. And the standard that we've used in the past, I hope we don't re-adopt that, because that's the reason that we have failure of our roads. Balance is important, but push come to shove, the city shouldn't be responsible for, and I'm going to use the word improperly established roads. And maybe the improper part of it is our ordinance or lack thereof, but you're not being built in a manner that they should be in order to be more effective from a quality and longevity standpoint. Right.
I hope we are going to look at that. I think it's very important. It's a big issue, and you know that, Mayor. We get lots and lots of complaints, and not knowing what those standards are or anything else, I think we need to take a serious look at them and see where we need to change.
Right, and in my opinion, we can save money for developers by having a narrower road standard with a deeper section of asphalt and base. So that's what we'll be looking at soon. I have that development committee which is looking at these issues, and without a city engineer, we're to a dead stop on that committee until we're fully staffed, because I can't do that without a city engineer.
The second topic is regards to the screening between commercial properties and residential areas. We've had an issue, it's come up a couple times over the last few months anyway, and probably a month and a half ago it came up again. And from what I understand, there were some screening requirements that didn't get done, but then there were also some screening that supposedly were done to spec and where trees were planted. And I went and looked at those, and I'm going to be dead and gone before those trees ever provide any screening between, so the intent is to be able to buffer for light and noise to some extent. And I don't know, again, I'll go back to it, I don't know what our standard is, but if what I saw at this location, I just do not say today, I don't want to bring into light anything against any business owner or anything, but if that is within our standards, then that standard has to change, because it certainly is not meeting what our objective would be. I could talk to you outside of here on that,
Yep.
but we need to have something that provides relatively quick impact on screening versus something that takes years and years to get to a point that it's screening.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that we can take a look at those requirements, and it's always difficult when we run into that transitional space between commercial and residential, and so hopefully we can make sure that our requirements are meeting what our intent is. And I'm not sure if they are or not. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just not sure if they are or not.
Mm-hmm.
And this
Definitely.
last complaint really brought it to light for me as to what may or may not be happening. So,
I'd be happy to talk about that. Anything else? New business? There's no need to go into executive session, and so I will adjourn the meeting. We'll be back at 5:30 for the city council meeting.